Welcome to the Crazy Chicken People podcast. If you're crazy about chickens, then you're in the right place. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Crazy Chicken People podcast. Guys, I will tell you what, it is definitely starting to feel a lot like Christmas around here, mostly because it's just so dang cold. And in the morning, everything's covered in frost. We don't get snow here, but that frozen morning dew with the colored lights bouncing off of it definitely gives that Christmas feeling. And it's a reminder that it's starting to get pretty cold out at night, at least cold for what we're used to around here. And with it being so cold, I've been spending a little bit of time every night having to put my chickens to bed. And I'm not talking about tucking them in or just stopping to say goodnight. I mean having to physically pick them up in the case of the silkies who tend to sleep down low, or grab them from their outside roosting spot and carry them into the coop to go to bed. I've been doing this every night for about the last 6 weeks, I think it's been now with the silkies, and probably for the last month or so with about half of the hens and the rooster in one of our bigger coops. Not that I mind doing this, it's actually a good time to get kind of close and do some checkups on some of the birds that don't typically like to be picked up. This is when I give Brock his little talking to, but it does give me some concern, especially with the silkies, that if for some reason I'm not home at night to put them into bed, maybe it's an especially cold or rainy night, that they'll just sit out there and freeze their fluffy little butts off. You would think that a chicken's survival instincts would be enough to get them to move in from the cold, especially when they can sit there and watch all their coop mates go in for the night. But some of them just don't, and I could never really figure out why. But as winter was approaching, I thought, okay, I really need to figure this out. I need to understand why some of my chickens choose to stay out in the cold, away from the rest of the flock and the warmth and safety of their coop. And hopefully, if I could understand the reason they're staying outside, maybe I can make some changes that would help them feel better about going into the coop at night. So this is something I've been working on for a while, and I had to dig in a little bit deeper than I would have guessed. And I haven't yet found solutions for all my chickens who seemingly prefer to sleep under the stars, but in many cases, I have found some help. I've been able to get some of them to go in on their own, and of course, I still have some chickens I'm working on. So it would seem that the question of why don't my chickens go into the coop to sleep is yet another dilemma that lacks a quick fix for everyone. But there are some things that we can look at within our flock and the home that we've made for them that we might be able to make some changes to that will help to resolve some of the core issues that are keeping these little cluckers out in the cold. So to start off, we should acknowledge that chickens have a strong instinct to find a safe and elevated spot to spend the night. In the wild, this behavior helped to protect them from predators, and for a long time after being domesticated, many chickens continued to find safe sleeping quarters up in trees, bushes, maybe up in a barn rafter, or even on the back porch. Now, this could be different depending on the environment around them, how susceptible they are to predators, and just what they had available. But for a very long time, dedicated chicken coops just weren't real common with chicken keepers because letting them free range and find their own accommodations was cheap, required no extra effort, and it worked. But what was common then and hasn't changed today is that chickens' instincts tell them to find a safe place to sleep. But with that being true, why is it that our modern domesticated friends will seemingly stray from this instinct when it comes to choosing where to roost? We built that coop to be safe for them. We trimmed it out, presumably to their liking, with nesting boxes, perches, but still they sometimes choose to stay out in the cold, away from some of their friends, in a place that would seem far less desirable. And not because they don't want to be safe, or because they didn't care for the color you decided to paint the coop, but because there's something telling them that going into that coop just isn't their safest option. So with that in mind, now let's explore some of the common reasons why chickens may choose to camp outside rather than take advantage and enjoy the comfort of their coop. Now, if you're lucky, it could be something really, really simple to address. The easiest is that if this is a situation where you just put some birds into a coop and run for the first time, like if they've just graduated from their brooder or their grow out pen, they may just not know where home is yet. Usually the solution is as easy as just putting them to bed every night for 4 or 5 nights in a row, sometimes even less than that. And then they seem to figure it out. And that's probably the most common occurrence of chickens avoiding the coop, and almost always a pretty easy fix. Now, I've seen people recommend that even locking them into the coop for a couple of days might be a good way to teach them that that's their home. They'll get accustomed to it. Once they're released, they then have the option to go out into the run and come back home for the night. But I don't really like the idea of that. There has been times where I locked them in at night just because I wasn't sure if they were going to sneak back out, but I never felt it necessary to lock them up throughout the day. But now, if we're talking about an established flock who should know where their bed is, then we have to start looking at some less obvious reasons for the behavior. Things like a dirty or overcrowded coop, maybe getting bullied from somebody else in the flock, or even environmental factors like poor ventilation are all possible reasons that your chickens seem to prefer being outside. So let's break these issues down and discuss how they might contribute to the bedtime rebellion. I know we all do our best to keep their coops as clean as possible, but maybe because you have an especially picky chicken, or maybe there's some kind of hygienic issue that you just haven't noticed, a coop that seems like it may be dirtier than another option they've found may drive them out of there. Ammonia buildup, which can be toxic, can definitely be a reason that your hens choose to stay outside. Excess poop and moisture buildup, which can lead to bacteria and fungus. Even these are something that a chicken knows that they should avoid. And in extreme cases, a coop that's gone too long without a good cleaning could start to become home to pests like mites. Poop on roosting bars and nesting boxes can become home to hundreds of these nasty little things, and just like us, your chicken does not want to sleep with bedbugs. If things have gotten to this point, you'll probably need to do a full-on purge of the coop, removing all the litter, sand, whatever it is you have in there, and really do a deep cleaning. Probably want to use a pressure washer, and then disinfect all surfaces of the coop. It's a lot of work, but it's definitely needed at that point, and probably something that we should all consider doing once or twice a year, even if you aren't seeing any problems. Okay, the next thing we need to look at is ventilation. I know we've talked about the importance of this in several episodes, but that's because it is very important. It may even be that your coop is really well kept, but a lack of ventilation is causing the air to get stale and stinky. This can lead to a buildup of moisture, which can spur bacteria growth. Definitely not a good thing. But on the flip side, if you've got too much air passing through there, and maybe it's passing through right where they like to roost, this can become kind of drafty in there, a little uncomfortable, and maybe they know of a spot outside with a wind block. So if you are dealing with chickens that seem to avoid sleeping inside, this can be an easy first thing to check, and it can be quickly resolved by just checking where the drafts are coming from and either plugging some holes or maybe even moving the roosts out of those wind paths, but still making sure that your coop is getting the right amount of fresh air, just not blowing right across your chicken's bed. Another possibility is that your coop is simply overcrowded. And whether the coop itself is actually too small for the number of chickens you have, or if your birds are just taking up maybe more space than you figured they would, somebody might literally be getting left out in the cold. And likely this would be one of your chickens that fills those bottom couple rungs in the pecking order. And it's very possible that when they try or have tried to find a spot to roost, that they were forced out by a more dominant bird. And even if there is plenty of room, it could be that you have a bully in the flock who's making another chicken feel unwanted and, more specifically, unsafe in that space. Now, this is where knowing your flock and the internal dynamics of their little circle is really important, and it may determine how you go about resolving this issue. So if you know that the coop is plenty large enough for the number of birds that you're keeping in there, you may need to add a couple more roosting spots where they're able to space it out a little bit better, possibly rearrange the roosts that are in there if you think that'll help. And if a bully seems to be the issue, you could even look at creating like a partition in there. It could be a curtain, maybe a piece of wood that you put up to separate a couple of roosting areas. You may find that putting a divider in there and giving those chickens a chance to separate could resolve any issues that they were having. Now, as a last resort with bullies, I have pulled birds from the flock and either given them some solo time to think about their actions, or even try to mix them in with another flock if that's a possibility for you. I really don't like having to do this, and I know there can be some negative emotional side effects of this, but there is times that, with the best interest and well-being of the whole flock in mind, it is necessary, and I have seen it help. Often you'll notice that even a temporary change in the flock, involving just one or two birds, can shake things up a little bit, kind of reset the pecking order, give some of those birds that seem to always be at the bottom a chance to reestablish their position, and hopefully get back into a good standing with the rest of the flock. Ideally, this will lead the bully, once she's let back into that pen, to see that this other chicken is just a friend who also wants to feel safe and welcome with everybody. Okay, so now we've looked at some of the housekeeping issues, even some of the inner flock dynamics that could be pushing your chickens out, but there's a good chance that you don't have any of the problems we've discussed, and yet your chickens still don't feel safe in their home. So we have to consider any external issues that may be the cause. This could be things like rodents or predators. I don't think mice would be enough to chase your chickens out unless you're talking about like a serious infestation. But something more aggressive like rats, even larger predators that are regularly trying to get into the coop. I've even read that a coop or run where a predator has gotten in and done some damage, killed some chickens. If other chickens are around and they've seen that happen, it's very possible that they remember this and that they no longer feel safe in that area. I actually think this could be an issue in my silky pen. I did have a raccoon that got in there a while ago. I mean, that was a bad day. It did get some of my birds, and I do feel like those that survived are kind of traumatized from that. I actually removed them from that coop for a while so that I could go in and take care of some of the issues, make sure nothing could ever get back in again. So that is one thing to think about. But you could also have rats that are trying to burrow in or even climbing in through some of your vents at night. This can stress a chicken out, especially when they're trying to sleep. They do not want to be up on their perch, hearing things running around underneath them. If they can't see what it is, they may very well think it's something large that's trying to get at them. But if you're not seeing this and you're not noticing any of the other things we talked about, you may want to go and get a camera to set up and really try to figure out what's going on in your coop after dark, because there's probably something that's just scaring your chickens out of there. Now, these seem to be the most common reasons that chickens will avoid going into the coop at night, but there could be something unique to where you live that seems to be causing this problem. Getting that camera would definitely help with this. I know that can be a little pricey, kind of a pain to set up. So looking at other options there, it might just be hanging out around your chicken coop at night, keeping a close eye on what's going on, even if that means going out in the current cold weather we're having. But once you do figure out the problem and you do what you can to try to make that situation better, you may still struggle actually getting them to go back in. Now, there's a couple things I've found that were successful for me, at least some of the time. And the obvious one is just what I'm doing now, carrying them in each and every night until they finally start feeling comfortable to do it on their own. I'm doing this right now in one of my silky pens and with some of the birds in another coop. It can be kind of a pain to go out there every night. It is cold out now, but the truth is I kind of enjoy it. This is when Brock and I have our little talk, and it gives me a chance to kind of give some love to the other hens that don't typically like to be picked up. In fact, I learned something new about one of my chickens doing this. I found out that I do have another pecker on my hands, actually literally pecking my hands. Every night when I go to pick her up, she usually gives me a few pecks when I grab the chicken next to her, just to let me know, like, hey, stay away. And then when I come back for her, she gives me a few more. But once I pick her up, pet her a little bit, I talk really calm to her, she cools down, and I think she's actually happy when I put her inside. It's never been anything aggressive, so I haven't been trying to do anything to deter that behavior. I think she just doesn't like being picked up, and she's telling me to back off, which I will happily do once she starts going to bed on her own. Now, if you prefer to encourage them to go in on their own, one thing you can try is putting a light in your coop. I think ideally you set up this timer so that it comes on just before it gets dark, and then leave it on for 20-30 minutes afterwards. Hopefully that little period they've started to see, hey, there's light in there, let's go get set up. They'll get comfortable, light will go off, and then it's bedtime. You'll want to use a really soft light. You're not trying to totally illuminate this space, Just enough so that they see, hey, it's dark over here. Let's go into the light. You want it to be welcoming, but not really, really bright in there to where it keeps them up. This isn't meant to extend their day and try to get more eggs. It's just something to kind of pull them back into that space, hopefully making them a little bit more comfortable because they can see what's going on when they go in. Now, if you can't set up anything with a plug, you can hang a small flashlight in there somewhere, maybe use one of those little battery-operated touch lights. Those are both fairly cheap and easy to set up, and hopefully you don't have to do this for an extended amount of time. Now, there's totally a chance that nothing I just talked about actually applies to your flock, and that none of these reasons I mentioned are actually why your chickens won't go sleep at night. I know, real helpful, right? But what you can take away from this is it's not just that your chickens don't like the coop. So if we've determined that it is some sort of thing where your chickens just don't feel comfortable going in there, spend some time with them, try to figure out what it is that's triggering this feeling. And when you're able to eliminate that and then slowly start working them back into there, I think you're going to find some positive results. I have had success in the past getting chickens to adapt to their new coop. And I think that it'll work out with my current chickens I'm having the issue with. It's just going to take a little bit more time than I wanted. Silkies are so finicky. 6 weeks going on with them, and they still seem totally content to just have me put them away at night. Maybe it's Brock showing his softer side and he actually enjoys getting delivered to his bedtime roost every night. Probably not, but I like to think so. I got a lot of work to do with those little guys. I think my bigger ones are trending in the right direction though. And I think if you're able to find out what exactly is bothering your birds in the evening, you'll be able to have the same positive results. Okay, guys, that's it for this week. Appreciate you listening as always, and I'll talk to you again soon.